Furthermore, the permanent representative of Israel to the UN, Danny Danon, on the 9th of December 2024, sent to the Secretary General of the UN and the President of the Security Council a letter describing as temporary, limited, and defensive the nature of the measures undertaken by the Israeli army in the south of Syria, including in the deployment area of UNDAF forces. We call upon the Israeli side to, in practice, reaffirm the commitment set out in the letter to the disengagement agreement and to international law, and to, without any preconditions, immediately revert back to compliance therewith. At the practical level, this includes the withdrawal of Israeli army units and the termination of arbitrary strikes. On the whole, we view as nefarious for the security of the entire Middle East any attempts to destabilize Syria or derail efforts to towards normalization of the situation in the country. Only a strong, united, prosperous, and independent Syria, with respect for the rights of all ethno-religious minorities, will be a home for all Syrians. A Syria that embarks upon the path towards national reconciliation with a unified army and security forces, with, among others, experienced Syrian professionals in their ranks, a Syria that will become a reliable and predictable partner for all states in the region. We strongly condemn any attempts to exploit the period of political transformation and economic uncertainty to impose foreign and alien directives upon the Syrian people. Not only such actions will be detrimental to ordinary civilians, Syrian civilians, but they may generate centrifugal processes and spawn prolonged chaos. This must be prevented. Furthermore, reaffirm our unchanging and principled position about the sovereignty of Syria over the Golan Heights. We believe that lasting normalization of the situation in Syria is only possible through inclusive intra-Syrian dialogue, which is geared towards the achievement of national consensus in the advancement of a comprehensive political settlement in accordance with the core principles which are enshrined in Security Council Resolution 2254. We believe that the UN needs to play a key role in accompanying the Syrian-led and Syrian-owned political process. We extend our support for the efforts of the UN Special Envoy Geir Peterson, and we call upon the Syrian authorities to proactively engage with Mr. Peterson. Mr. President, we wish to separately draw attention to the importance of a transparent and an objective investigation into the recent wave of violence in the coastal regions of Latakia and Tartus, where hundreds, if not thousands, of Alawite, Christian, and other ethnic and religious minority civilians were wounded and killed. We are awaiting the results of the work of the relevant commission which has been put together by the Syrian authorities, the results of which must be promptly brought to the attention of the membership of the Security Council. This demand is also set out in the relevant presidential statement, which inter alia emphasizes the need to expeditiously hold all perpetrators to account. Only on this sound, just, and inclusive foundation is it possible to build a new Syria where the rights of all ethno-religious minorities and all citizens of that country will be upheld. We trust that the Syrian authorities will adopt a constructive approach vis-à-vis implementation of the provisions of the above-mentioned presidential statement. Mr. President, the Russian Federation is a loyal, tried and true friend of the Syrian people. We have been and continue to uphold the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Syria. We genuinely hope that the Syrians will adopt and implement the right decisions that will guarantee political and social stability in the country, as well as its progressive and sustained development for the benefit of all residents of that state, barring none. We stand ready to help to achieve this as a permanent member of the Security Council, as well as bilaterally. Thank you. I thank the permanent representative of the Russian Federation for his statement, and I now give the floor to the permanent representative of Greece. Thank you very much.
By thanking our briefers, Assistant Secretary General Chiari and Under Secretary General Lacroix, for the valuable information they have provided. Today, I would like to highlight the following 3 points. First, the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Syria must be respected by all. Syrian sovereignty has been systematically violated. we reiterated our call for the full implementation of the 1974 disengagement agreements and emphasized the responsibility of all parties to uphold international obligations. While we recognize the right of Israel to defend itself and ensure the security of its citizens, we stress the need for this to be done in accordance with international law with the utmost care to avoid civilian casualties. We express our condolences for those deceased and pray for the speedy recovery of those injured. We similarly draw attention to violations of Syrian sovereignty in the north, coupled with ongoing violations and kinetic activities, further exacerbating Syria's stability. We deplore attacks in Syria north and northeast, among others on the Tishrim Dam, which is key for local water security. Greece continues to stand firmly in support of Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity, stressing that a united, secure and peaceful Syria is the best way to ensure the well-being of its people and regional stability for Syria and its neighbors. Second, a truly inclusive political transition combined with transitional justice is the key to viable peace in the country. Following the fall of the previous regime in Syria, Greece remains steadfast in its solidarity with the Syrian people as we work toward the recovery of the country. This recovery can only be achieved through a truly inclusive political transition, one that is guided by the principle of Security Council Resolution 2254, supporting the formation of credible and resilient state institutions which respect international law and the international law of the sea, the protection of the full integration of all Syrian communities, including Christian, Alawites, Druze and Kurds, is key for rational reconciliation and the long-term prosperity of the country. We are encouraged by the recent engagement between interim President al-Shara and Special Envoy Pedersen on the importance of a transparent election process for an interim People's Assembly. The atrocities committed in the coastal regions, as condemned by this Council's presidential statement of 14th of March, underscore the urgency for full accountability and inclusive justice. This is crucial for the credibility of the interim authorities. In this regard, we eagerly expect the outcome of the independent fact-finding committee set up to identify those responsible for the mass killings and bring them to justice. We also reaffirm our support to the independent international impartial and objective mechanism, the international impartial mechanism, and the Commission of Inquiry, all critical UN mechanisms in terms of accountability. On the Constitutional Declaration and Political Transition, we take note of the formation of the transitional government in Damascus, and we consider the inclusion of representatives of ethnic and religious groups to be crucial for its success. We likewise note, however, that these developments were not met with universal acceptance for all communities, and there might still be some question marks on how representative the makeup of this transitional government is. We are equally concerned that, among others, the increased influence of the executive power on the formation of the legislative authority may not lead to a truly inclusive and viable political process. Third and last point, we must not lose sight of the humanitarian crisis in Syria. Recognizing the severe humanitarian crisis in the country, Greece made at the recent recovery conference in Brussels a pledge in support of Syria's recovery, contributing to the EU overall commitment of some 2.5 billion euros, tangibly reflecting a commitment to help rebuild Syria. Within the EU, Greece has supported the easing of sanctions, while emphasizing that this should be done in a gradual, conditional, and reversible manner. This approach is taken in solidarity with the Syrian people as a means to ensure that expectations are met in terms of an inclusive transition, accountability, transitional justice, as well as full adherence to international law, including the international law of the sea. Mr. President, in closing, let me stress that the only viable future for Syria is one of peace, justice, and inclusiveness. Greece remains committed to supporting a political transition that respects the rights of all of Syria's diverse community, advances the prosperity and security of the Syrian people, and ensures regional stability. For this purpose, we must continue to uphold Syria's unity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, free from external influence and interventions. I thank you.
I thank the Permanent Representative of Greece for his statement. I give the floor to the Permanent Representative of Denmark.
President, and I thank Assistant Secretary General Chiari and Under Secretary General Lacroix for their briefings and for their continued efforts to support stability in Syria. As we've heard, the situation in Syria remains volatile. This was shockingly clear 1 month ago, when violence and widespread killings of civilians rocked Syria's coastal region. Denmark strongly condemns these acts of violence. We reiterate the need for a thorough investigation and that the perpetrators are held accountable. What is needed now is a safe and stable Syria, one that can heal from the horrific crimes of the past and look to the future. This is true for all Syrians and for the wider region. Mr. President, allow me to make 3 points. First, we reiterate our full support for Syria's territorial integrity, political independence, and sovereignty. While we acknowledge Israel's legitimate security concerns, we remain concerned by the recent Israeli attacks in Syria with reported civilian casualties. Let us be clear. Attacks against strategic infrastructure are not going to create a more stable Syria. These developments will only further fuel tensions and insecurity. Instead, the focus should be on our collectively addressing security concerns, including presence of ISIL and other terrorist groups, and the reported remaining chemical weapons in Syria. Second, Mr. President, we reiterate our full support for UNDOF and for the 1974 agreement. We call for the full implementation of the 1974 agreement between Syria and Israel. For decades, UNDOF has worked to address both Israel's and Syria's security concerns. We are deeply concerned by Israeli statements that its presence in the area of separation in the Golan Heights could be for an unlimited period. UNDOF must be allowed to implement its mandate unhindered. Accordingly, Israel must withdraw from the area of separation. Third, Mr. President, let me reaffirm Denmark's steadfast support for a genuine political transition in Syria in line with Resolution 2254. The national dialogue, the constitutional declaration, and the recent announcement of the Syrian transitional government are all steps to this end. We further underline the importance of a truly inclusive transition where Syrian women are fully represented. This is all taking place against the backdrop of a dire economic situation with profound humanitarian consequences for the people of Syria. While the response to immediate needs remains critical, this crisis can only be addressed through sustained support for recovery and reconstruction. The UN, through Special Envoy Peterson, is well placed to assist the transitional Syrian leaderships in charting the complex path forward. Mr. President, in closing, significant strides have been made along Syria's path to a new future. However, challenges remain, both politically and in terms of security. The international community, in particular this Council, has a responsibility to support the people of Syria on this path. Denmark remains committed to this end. I thank you.
I thank the permanent representative of Denmark for her statement. I now give the floor to the permanent representative of the Republic of Korea.
I would also like to thank ASG Chiari and the USG LaCroix for their informative briefings. After 4 months, the Syrian people have finally witnessed the launch of a transitional cabinet, a critical first step for a long-awaited inclusive transition. However, Syria once again finds itself caught in a web of escalating geopolitical tensions, hampering its prospects for recovery and reconciliation after decades of unbearable suffering. I would like to make 3 points in this regard. First, all hostilities violating Syria's territorial sovereignty must stop. Since the fall of the Assad regime, Syria has neither attacked neighboring states nor indicated any intention to resort to aggressive action against them. In stark contrast, Israel has persistently conducted over 500 airstrikes since that time and is maintaining a military presence far beyond the Bravo line, a clear violation of the 1974 disengagement agreement. While we acknowledge Israel's security concerns, including risks of terrorism, we emphasize that such concerns cannot serve as justification for the use of force against a neighboring state and its civilians, particularly in the absence of a clear evidence of an imminent threat. The right to self-defense, as enshrined in international law, is temporary and contingent, not open-ended. As such, we express our grave concern over Israel's assertion that it will maintain an indefinite presence on Syrian land. And we urge Israel to live up to its obligations under the UN Charter and the 1974 agreement. This includes returning to its prior commitment of ensuring freedom of movement for UNDOF. We also call upon the UN and those with influence over the parties on the ground to pursue a sustainable resolution that respects the sovereignty of Syria and promotes long-term regional stability. Second, we urge all parties to prioritize the safe and verifiable destruction of Syria's chemical weapons stockpiles. We express deep concern over Israel's airstrike last week, targeting the vicinity of scientific studies and research center in Barzah, a site known to have been involved in developing chemical and missile technologies during the Assad era, and which was inspected by OPCW Secretariat during their visit last month. As the OPCW Director General said last December, such airstrikes not only risk contamination, but lead to the destruction of valuable evidence for investigations related to past chemical weapons use. Moreover, they may impede the growing momentum in cooperation between the OPCW and Syria. We therefore urge all relevant actors to refrain from actions that may undermine the full implementation of the Chemical Weapons Convention in Syria. Third, we urge the transitional government to advance a more inclusive political process in line with Resolution 2254. While external threats continue to pose challenges, Syria's internal stability is equally at risk as a result of ongoing sectarian violence and exclusion from the political process, a situation that could be addressed through better planning and improved communication. In this regard, the United Nations stands as a capable and willing partner. With its long-standing experience in facilitating political transitions through both political engagement and technical assistance, the UN is uniquely positioned to provide vital support for narrowing existing capacity gaps and rebuilding trust. We welcome the Secretary General's initiative to conduct an integrated strategic assessment and hope this will spur progress on inclusive governance, security sector reform, and transitional justice. In closing, Mr. President, the track record of the interim authorities over the past 4 months shows that while progress has been limited, meaningful steps forward are possible, provided the international community remains constructively engaged and firmly supportive. We simply cannot afford to lose this historic opportunity to bring Syria back on a path of peace and legitimacy. This process must not be derailed as a result of Syria regressing into a geopolitical battlefield. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the Permanent Representative of the Republic of Korea for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. And thank you to Under-Secretary General Lacroix and Assistant Secretary General Chiari for your briefing today. I will make 3 points. First, since this Council last met, Syria has made further positive progress in its political transition. The UK welcomes the announcement on the formation of the new Syrian government, and we look forward to the protection of human rights, unfettered access to humanitarian aid, the safe destruction of chemical weapons, and the combating of terrorism and extremism. The government's formation marks an important milestone in the transition. We hope this spirit of inclusive representation will be carried forward in state institutions and in any further appointments, including to the Legislative Committee and towards a clear timeline for the next phases of the transition. The UK stands ready to work with the Syrian government to this end and to support an inclusive, stable and prosperous future for the Syrian people. Second, this opportunity for stability is being threatened by the continued violence. We are concerned by Israeli strikes and incursions into Syria, with reports of civilian deaths. These actions risk destabilising Syria and the wider region, and this is in no one's interest. We recognise Israel's focus on protecting the security of its borders and its people, but the actions it takes must be proportionate and in line with international law. We call on all actors to uphold the 1974 disengagement agreement, respect Syrian territorial integrity, and to prioritise diplomacy over force. Third, it is the Syrian people who will suffer the most from this worrying escalation. After 14 years of tyranny and conflict at the hands of the Assad regime, the Syrian people still face a staggering humanitarian crisis. And that is why the UK has recently pledged up to $207 million in critical humanitarian assistance. Our focus should now be on supporting Syrians to rebuild their country. Therefore, we call on all parties to ensure that humanitarian access remains possible across Syria and that civilian lives are protected. The UK will continue to work with our international partners to support Syrians as they look to build a better future. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for her statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of France. I thank USG for peace operations, Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix, as well as the ASG for the Middle East, Asia, and the Pacific, Mr. Khaled Khiari, for their briefings, which have underscored the seriousness of the security situation in Syria. Syria is engaged in an historic transitional process since the overthrow of the Bashar al-Assad dictatorship. This opportunity has raised hopes for the Syrian people following decades of violence. The aspirations of the Syrians deserve support, and that is what France intends to do. In this unstable regional environment, political transition must enable Syria to become a center for peace and security. That means the cessation of all hostilities in Syria and respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Syria in accordance with the principles of the UN Charter and the relevant resolutions of the UN Security Council. These are essential elements to guarantee a peaceful political transition and stabilization in the country. Fragmentation of Syria is not in anyone's interest. We reiterate our appeal to Israel to end its military activities on Syrian territory and to withdraw from the area of separation pursuant to the 1974 disengagement agreement with respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Syria. Syria and Israel must take account of each other's security concerns. In this transitional period, we must above all make sure that Syria does not fall prey to fragmentation. With that in mind, our Council has asked that full light be shed on the unacceptable violence which cost the lives of civilians, which took place in the month of March as a result of, on the basis of religion. Those who are responsible must be brought to justice, and we will closely examine the conclusions of the commission established by the caretaker authorities to investigate these crimes and the actions that will be taken. In northeast Syria, the agreement in principle signed between the caretaker authorities and the Syrian Democratic Forces is a positive first step towards a negotiated solution for the unification of Syria and guaranteeing the rights and interests of the Kurds of Syria. The terrorist threat remains high, and it is essential for the Damascus authorities to fight tirelessly against this threat, particularly against Daesh, and to resolve the issue of foreign terrorist fighters. The international community is expecting, particularly from the Syrian authorities, the dismantling of the chemical weapons program in full cooperation with the OPCW. And finally, in order to achieve just and lasting peace in Syria, it is essential to guarantee the inclusivity of the political transition. Initial encouraging results have been achieved with the holding of the first national dialogue session and the announcement of a new government. This government must consolidate commitments of the Syrian caretaker authorities and respond to the expectations and needs of the Syrian people. One of the expectations is the setting up of a transitional government. Those who have been convicted of crimes must not go unpunished, and France supports combating impunity in Syria and cooperation with the Syrian authorities. In tandem, national dialogue must be pursued and must involve all components of Syrian society. France recalls its commitment to an inclusive and representative political transition in the spirit of the principles of Resolution 2254. We support Mr. Geir Pedersen's efforts to support this process, and we trust that Cooperation between Syrian authorities and the United Nations will build trust and solidify the support of the international community's support for Syria. I resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, at the outset, I would like to congratulate you on assuming the presidency of the Security Council for this month, wishing you and your team every success. I also wish to thank your predecessor, the Permanent Representative of Denmark, and her team for their effective management of the Council's work during the past month. I extend my thanks for your prompt response to the request to convene this emergency session. Gratitude is also due to the distinguished delegations of brotherly Algeria and Somalia and the member states of the Arab Group in New York for their support of the Syrian Arab Republic request to hold this meeting. I also thank Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix, the Under-Secretary General for Peacekeeping Operations, and Mr. Khiari, the Assistant Secretary General, for their briefings. I also welcome Ms. Liwa Anita Asma, head of UNDOF, with us in this session today, and I thank her and her team for their efforts to uphold UNDOF's mandate. Mr. President, a majority of UN member states, including within this Council, have emphasized over the past 4 months the need to support Syria and the Syrian people during this sensitive phase of their present and future. We have all witnessed the international consensus on the necessity of uniting efforts to end the suffering of the Syrian people, which is a protracted suffering, and to support Syria's stability, security, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, as this would positively reflect on the stability of the region and the security and well-being of its peoples. In parallel with those positive and constructive declarations and initiatives undertaken by member states, international organizations, and political groups to support Syria and its people, as we witnessed during the Arab Summit hosted by Cairo, the meeting of the OIC's foreign ministers in Jeddah, the conferences of Aqaba, Riyadh, Paris, the Brussels Donors Conference, and other international fora held in Davos and Munich. So in parallel with all this, the Israeli occupying authorities have persisted in their aggressive actions, which constitute a challenge to these international efforts and aim at threatening the unity and integrity of the Syrian territory, undermining the efforts of the Syrian government, and imposing a new reality that contradicts the hope and aspirations of the Syrians to live in their homeland in safety and peace. Mr. President, the Israeli occupying authorities have escalated their aggression against the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of the Syrian Arab Republic, posing a serious threat to international peace and security and a grave violation of international law, of the UN Charter and the relevant resolutions, as well as of the 1974 Disengagement Agreement. Since last December, the occupation forces have launched hundreds of airstrikes against my country, the latest of which was launched on the 3rd of April at dawn on Thursday, and within 30 minutes several airstrikes were launched against 5 different areas across the country. These attacks resulted in the near-total destruction of the Hama military airport, the injury of dozens of civilians and military personnel, and the destruction and extensive damage to other military and civilian facilities in the governorates of Homs and Damascus. Concurrently with this aggression, units of the Israeli occupation forces penetrated the Daraa countryside and bombed the Al-Jubayliyah dam forest area west of Daraa, killing 9 civilians and wounding others. This aggression was preceded by another attack on the town of Al-Quwaya in the Dara countryside, which resulted in the death of 7 civilians. The latest report of the Secretary General concerning the UNDOF force highlighted some aspects of the Israeli aggressions against Syria. The report clearly indicated the incursion of the Israeli occupation forces into the buffer zone, the significant alteration of the situation therein, and the impact of the forces' operations since the 8th of December, in violation of the relevant Security Council resolutions. Moreover, the report recorded the complaints of our people in that area due to the Israeli occupation army preventing farmers from accessing their agricultural lands and sources of livelihood and damaging them, arresting Syrian citizens, stealing their livestock, destroying roads, disrupting electricity, water, and internet services, and occupying buildings belonging to the Konatora governorate and damaging them. Israeli practices in the territories it recently infiltrated beyond the buffer zone are not limited to the above. They have also extended to threatening the water security of Syria and neighboring countries by seizing control of water resources in southern Syria, diverting river flows and water springs in Mount Hermon and the southern water resources. This will directly endanger Syria's water and food security. On the other hand, the Israeli occupation entity continues its provocative practices against Syria and its people by establishing military outposts and bases for its forces and promoting tourist tours for settlers in the areas it has invaded. This exposes the falsity of the occupation entity's claims that its incursion is temporary and limited. It clearly reveals its aggressive and expansionist intentions and its contempt for the UN Charter, the foundation of international law, and relevant Security Council and General Assembly resolutions. Mr. President, Syria, while reaffirming the content of its 4 most recent related letters, most recently the complaint submitted to Your Excellency, the President of the Security Council, and His Excellency, the Secretary General, on the 7th of this month, which will be issued as document S/2025/216, renews its strongest condemnation of the blatant Israeli attacks and of the provocative statements by Israeli officials, calling for what they termed the disarmament of the Syrian state in the southern provinces, and for promoting false claims about protecting certain components of the Syrian national society, pretending to protect them. Syria, while expressing its gratitude to the states that have stood by its side and clearly condemned the Israeli attacks and called for their cessation, calls on the Security Council to condemn these aggressions and to take an immediate and decisive action to compel Israel to cease its ongoing aggression against Syrian territory, to withdraw immediately and unconditionally from all Syrian lands, to fully comply with the 1974 disengagement agreement, to respect the mandates of UNDOF and UNSO, and to implement the relevant Security Council resolutions, particularly resolutions 242, 338, and 497, to end the Israeli occupation of the occupied Syrian Golan and the grave threat it poses to Syria's unity, sovereignty, and security. While reaffirming its inalienable right to extend its sovereignty over all its territories, Syria rejects any Israeli attempts to interfere in its internal affairs, destabilize its security and stability, or impose a new occupation reality. Syria affirms its commitment to the UN Charter, the provisions of international law, and international legitimacy resolutions as the basis for achieving stability and peace in the region. I cannot fail to commend the efforts of the peacekeepers among UNSO and UNDOF personnel and their leadership in New York and on the field, and to commend their determination and commitment to demonstrate their willingness to fulfill their mandate despite the significant challenges they face. As a result of the practices of the occupation forces, including restrictions imposed on their freedom of movement. Syria reaffirms its willingness to spread its forces along the separation lines and to commit to the disengagement agreement. In conclusion, Mr. President, with every day that the Security Council delays upholding its responsibilities in maintaining international peace and security and ending the ongoing Israeli aggression against my country, the potential for instability increases, and the threat posed by this aggression to the region and to my country, Syria, and all the peoples of the region grows. Attempts to impose solutions by force and to give precedence to the law of force over the force of law are doomed to failure, not to mention that they do not serve regional stability and they contradict the strenuous efforts being made to consolidate the values and culture of peace in the region and advance it towards prosperity and development. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of Syria, and I give the floor to the permanent representative of Libya.
Mr. President, at the outset, allow me to submit this statement on behalf of the Arab group. I would like to thank you for answering the call of Somalia and Algeria to hold this important meeting called for also by the Arab group. I'd also like to thank Mr. Khaled Khiari and Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix for their briefings. Mr. President, the Arab group expresses its deep condemnation of the military escalation of the occupying Israeli forces, the repeated aggression against Syria, especially the latest attack that has targeted several areas on the 3rd of April, and we would like to recall that such attacks are a blatant violation of international law and the UN Charter. They are undoubtedly a threat to the peace and security of the entire region. It also adds to the suffering of the Syrian people who are already suffering because of the ongoing crises. The attacks of the occupation forces that targeted 5 different positions, including the destruction of the Hama military airport almost completely and the huge damage to several civilian and military positions in Homs and Damascus, are only part of a series of attacks that aim at undermining the security of Syria. It also is a threat to the safety and security of the Syrian people and hinders the regional and international effort to bring about stability in the region. The Arab group underlines that such attacks are not only a violation of the peace, security, and territorial integrity of Syria, but also a total and blatant undermining of the security of Syria and the resolutions of this council, including 242, 338, and 497, that calls to end the Israeli occupation of the Syrian Golan. It's also a grave violation of the disagreement of forces agreement. This is a clear violation of the mandate of the UN forces, whether they are the UNDOF or the UNTSO. Mr. President, the Arab group condemns in the strongest words such attacks and call upon the international community and the Security Council in particular to shoulder their legal and moral responsibility and bring pressure to bear on the Israeli occupation forces to stop their aggression immediately and to adhere to the international law and ensure a full and unconditional withdrawal of their forces from all Syrian territories, including the recent movements that only aim at abusing the current developments in Syria and expand their occupation. Therefore, your Council must take immediate and urgent steps to put an end to such provocative actions before things go out of control and threaten international peace and security, whether in the region or beyond. The Arab group also stresses, in parallel with the development of the transitional stage after the fall of the previous regime and the continued effort to bring about development, to lift economic sanctions against Syria as soon as possible, because they are a hindrance to the revival of the economy of Syria and their development. The Arab group also stresses the need to continue the comprehensive political process with Syria, the Syrian-led, Syrian-owned process that is all-encompassing of all factions in Syria, in line with Security Council Resolution 2254. This will be part of international effort aimed at supporting peace and prosperity in Syria. In this vein and in the same context, the Arab group also condemns the continued occupation of the Israeli forces of 5 areas in southern Lebanon, including new areas that were not occupied before, which is a huge violation of the sovereignty of Lebanon and Resolution 1701 and the agreement between the two countries. We stress that the Security Council must shoulder its responsibility and compel the Israeli occupation forces to fully and immediately withdraw without any conditions from all occupied Lebanese territory. We commend the progress made in deploying the Lebanese forces south of the Litani River, and we support Lebanon, its peace, security, and sovereignty. Mr. President, to conclude, these continued aggression, while most countries of the world are aiming at de-escalating such international tensions and putting an end to crises and wars which have reached their apogee due to the Israeli occupation forces' violation of the ceasefire agreement, also in Gaza, and the continued violations in the West Bank, show clearly that the Israeli forces are trying to destabilize the entire region. They want to continue this series and chains of wars and killing for only one reason. This is a clear and bad intention to turn these crises as a cover-up for their own internal problems and support whoever is in control. Therefore, we stress our full support to Syria and its people. The security of Syria is part and parcel of the Arab security. Therefore, we call for concerted regional and international effort to put an end to such violations and ensure the respect of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Syria, and put an end to this situation that will only push the region to the abyss. It is high time for Syria to recover from the crises and enjoy peace, security, and prosperity. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the permanent representative of Libya for the statement on behalf of the Arab group, and I give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I thank our briefers here today. Amid serious and sustained instability, we are witnessing the re-emergence of radical Islamic armed groups committed only to destruction, terror, and annihilation of our nation. These groups in southern Syria are working to establish military infrastructure in areas just kilometers from Israeli communities. That infrastructure includes rocket launchers, explosives, and underground facilities, all designed to threaten the lives of innocent civilians. Israel cannot and will not allow this to happen. We have been clear and consistent. This is our policy. We will do whatever is necessary for however long it takes to prevent another October 7th. The images of October 7th are burnt into the minds of our people. We know what happens when a terrorist network is permitted to entrench itself, when warnings are ignored, when red lines are crossed without consequence. We have seen the signs: organized terrorist cells, foreign-built weapon systems, and the consolidation of hostile forces in southern Syria. We have acted, and we will continue to act. Our actions are guided not by ambition of expansion, but purely by necessity, security, and prevention. Colleagues, these clear priorities have defined recent Israeli operations in Syria. One such example is a ground mission recently conducted by IDF Special Forces in central Syria. There, our forces dismantled an underground missile factory constructed by Iran. This factory of death had already begun producing precision-guided missiles, several of which were subsequently used in attacks on Israeli territory by Hezbollah. That factory is no longer operational. In the weeks that followed, Israeli forces confiscated or destroyed more than 3,300 weapons and military assets which belong to Hezbollah. Among them, long-range rocket components, drones, anti-tank missiles, and tools for cross-border infiltration. These weapons were manufactured for a clear purpose: attacks on Israeli civilians and on regional stability. Let me be clear, Israel does not seek territorial gains in Syria. Our operations are precise and rooted exclusively in threat neutralization. Where a threat exists, we will meet it without hesitation. We must remind this Council that it is not only an Israeli civilians who stand to suffer from the growing entrenchment of jihadist groups. The Druze community of southern Syria, with whom Israel shares historic and familial ties, is increasingly at risk from the spread of jihadist groups in their traditional areas. These extremists threaten the fabric of diverse communities. We are committed to our Druze communities in Israel to do everything to prevent harm to their Druze brothers in Syria, and we will take the steps required to maintain their safety. Mr. President, Israel continues to coordinate with UNDOF under the framework of UN Security Council 350. We respect the mission's mandate and we support its stabilizing role along the disengagement lines. But let us be frank, peacekeeping efforts alone cannot stop the spread of sophisticated weaponry. They cannot intercept Iranian missile parts or dismantle terrorist tunnels. They cannot prevent the creation of launch sites embedded in civilian terrain. We are committed to deconfliction. We are committed to dialogue, but we are also committed to the protection of our people, and that must take precedence when lives are at stake. Council members, the Syrian government is in transition, and its authority throughout much of the country remains fragmented in reality. Control is contested. Security forces are overextended. And in the absence of cohesive governance, it is the most radical and violent actors who are taking advantage of this reality. Among the most troubling developments is the resurgence of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad activity in southern Syria. In recent months, Hamas operatives have re-established command centers and weapon caches in areas such as Beit Jan and the Dara refugee camp, again, using refugee camps near Damascus as a cover for military buildup. These actions directly endanger Israeli citizens and must be addressed with urgency. In addition to Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad continues to operate with Iranian backing, maintaining dozens of command centers in Syria. These groups are not independent actors. They are proxies of Iran, trained, equipped, and funded with clear goals to attack Israel and destabilize the region. The recent movement of hundreds of PIJ terrorists from Lebanon to Syria only underscores this threat. Terrorists thrive in instability. This is not theoretical. It is a pattern, one you have seen and discussed too many times in this chamber before. The Council must acknowledge this reality. Southern Syria is vulnerable to becoming a forward base for extremist groups unless the international community, including this body, treats the situation with the urgency, seriousness, and clarity it demands. Israel's position is principled and consistent. We will act to prevent the consolidation of terrorist groups along our borders. We will maintain a demilitarized buffer zone to keep civilians safe. We will support humanitarian cooperation with threatened communities, especially the Druze. We'll engage constructively with international mechanisms. Above all, we will continue to dismantle, disrupt, and deny the ability of our enemies to prepare for the next war. This is not escalation, it is protection. It is what every responsible nation would do in our position, and what any government here would demand if the same threats were directed at its citizens. We urge this Council to adopt a posture grounded in realism, not political rhetoric. The challenges in Syria are not going away. If left unaddressed, they will grow and they will not remain confined to one border. The international community must understand what is at stake, not just for Israel, but for all those who wish to see this region free from the grip of terror. We should all remember that a selective approach by this Council, scrutinizing Israel while turning a blind eye to state and non-state actors fueling terror and chaos in Syria, will not serve the cause of peace and stability. A genuine commitment to stability in Syria requires acknowledging and addressing the full spectrum of threats facing the region. Israel will continue to defend its people decisively, consistently, and in accordance with international law. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Israel for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, let me express our appreciation to ASG Chiari as well as USG Lacroix for their comprehensive briefings. Mr. President, we meet today at a critical moment for Syria. The decisions of the international community will influence whether Syria advances towards peace and stability or falls back into conflict and fragmentation. Mr. President, despite immense challenges, the new Syrian administration has made notable progress. The National Dialogue Conference, the Constitutional Declaration, and the formation of a technocratic government reflect a commitment to building inclusive national consensus. These steps signal the administration's will to lead a Syrian-owned, Syrian-led political transition in line with the aspirations of its people. We also note the responsiveness to regional and international concerns. Their engagement with various countries and their constructive dialogue established with UN bodies, particularly the Special Envoy, are commendable. We welcome Syria's proactive approach on the chemical weapons file. Its firm commitment to the complete destruction of remaining stockpiles is commendable. The Syrian authorities granted full access to the relevant sites and extended full cooperation to the OPCW technical team. Taken together, these steps point to a readiness to open a new chapter based on constructive engagement with the international community. The Syrian authorities have also made clear that they harbor no hostile intent towards their neighbors. Mr. President, despite these positive signs, Israel continues its unprovoked aggression against Syria. Repeated airstrikes and land incursions without justification violate Syria's sovereignty and threaten regional stability. We echo, therefore, the condemnation expressed by the Special Envoy. This Council must act urgently to prevent further escalation. Israel's military actions not only undermine Syria's internal security, but also regional stability. They also weaken Syria's capacity to fight Daesh, directly harming our collective counter-terrorism efforts. Strikes on suspected chemical storage sites raise serious risks and hinder accountability. Syria's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and unity must be fully respected. We call on the international community, especially this Council, to end Israeli aggression and ensure full implementation of the 1974 Separation of Forces Agreement. Mr. President, eliminating terrorist organizations in Syria, including Daesh and PKK, YPG, the so-called SDF, remains essential for lasting peace and unity. We prioritize cooperation with regional countries to address shared security threats. Last month's meeting among Turkey, Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon, and Syria is a strong example of regional ownership and collective resolve. We are closely following the agreement reached between the Syrian administration and the so-called SDF. Terrorist structures must be dismantled. All armed elements must surrender their weapons to the Syrian state. All terrorist entities must be removed from Syrian territory. Security responsibilities of detention centers and camps, in the northeast must be swiftly transferred to the Syrian administration. Turkey stands ready to cooperate with Syria on this vital task. Mr. President, failure in Syria is not an option. A successful political transition is imperative, not only for Syria, but also for regional stability. We must support Syrian government to build on recent gains. Yet, humanitarian funding for Syria remains insufficient. We call on all members of the international community to mobilize resources for urgent humanitarian needs and Syria's reconstruction. Barriers to cash flow and investment must be lifted. All sanctions should be removed unconditionally to enable Syria's integration and allow its people to rebuild their lives. The international community bears a collective responsibility to help the Syrian people recover with dignity. It is time to demonstrate genuine solidarity. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Turkey for her statement. There being no further names inscribed on the list of speakers, the meeting stands adjourned.